Judy Garland was perhaps the finest all-round performer in the history of American entertainment. There was no limit to her talent. When she was young and not weighted by worry, no one could be more beguiling or wistful. Judy had a great sense of joie de vivre. This was the sunny-spirited young songbird cherished by her legions of fans. She was at her most touching and radiant in Meet Me in St. Louis, a magical film musical directed in 1944 by her husband-to-be, Vincent Minnelli. Minnelli was one of the most flamboyant talents in the history of Hollywood, a manipulator of color, costumes, and sets, and at the peak of his powers, a dazzling manipulator of bravura acting. In Minnelli's hands, the musical exploded into Technicolor life. Minnelli was the master of the Technicolor dreamscape, whose fluidity suggested a new form which might consist solely of dance, light, and color. For a brief moment in the 40s, it seemed possible that Judy Garland and Vincent Minnelli would become the king and queen of the Hollywood musical. The couple married in 1945, but the dream died when, 5 years later, they were divorced. If not born in a truck, Frances Gumm was the daughter of vaudeville parents who introduced her to the stage in the mid-20s at the age of 3. She served her apprenticeship with her sister, billed as the Gumm Sisters, and at the age of 13, and now named Judy Garland, she was taken on by Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer to make her screen debut in 1936 in Every Sunday. Stardom lay just around the corner. At MGM, Garland was never more successful than as a teenage star, teamed with that studio's other super-talented youngster, Mickey Rooney. Rooney was like a pint-sized puppet running wild, whose non-stop energy was matched only by that of Judy Garland. Together, they set the screen alight. They were MGM's brightest and most profitable assets. On the surface, movie making had never seemed such unalloyed fun. The two teenagers were the personification of American bounce and brash energy. In Broadway Melody of 1939, Judy had entranced America with the song Dear Mr. Gable. Taking a paternal but by no means beneficial interest in his two super-talented youngsters was MGM's boss, the not-so-dear Mr. Louis B. Mayer. Mayer knew what was best for his stars, or thought he knew. But for Judy, the effect was disastrous. Mayer acted in league with Judy's mother, keeping her on a diet of pills to control her weight. Mother's little helpers were to turn her daughter's life upside down. At the time, they seemed only to stimulate Judy's natural hyperactivity. She wanted to cram 100 minutes into every hour. But there was a price to pay, something which songwriter Yip Harburg later vividly recalled.
They had a half-hour break, and after a half hour, she couldn't get up. Couldn't get up. Well, then they'd feed her a Benzedrine, you see. They'd feed her an upper. Well, this went on. 1 year it was 2 sleepers and 2 uppers, and then it was 3 sleepers, 3 uppers. Well, by the time she was way into her 20s and 30s, I mean, she was addicted to sleeping pills and the pills that, the wake-up pills.
This was not evident when in 1939 Judy starred as Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz. It was the third most expensive movie the studio had ever made. Judy had beaten Shirley Temple to the starring role. Given the status the movie enjoys today, in part thanks to Garland herself, it's interesting to note that The Wizard of Oz was not a huge success when it was released. But it won Garland a special Oscar, and the war years were to give her signature tune, Over the Rainbow, a greater resonance. The Yellow Brick Road was to take Judy Garland on a long and often melancholy journey. Rooney and Garland were now MGM's major attractions. But Judy was finding new attractions of her own. The brilliant child had become a young woman. Judy was all at sea on the tennis court and falling for older men. She developed a crush on band leader Artie Shaw, who was 10 years her senior, but he was to disappoint Judy. Within a few months, Shaw had married MGM's sultry sweater girl, Lana Turner. Judy turned her attentions to another band leader, David Rose, who in 1941 was to become the first of her 4 husbands. Little Dorothy had grown up, although MGM seemed reluctant to recognize the fact. Privately, Louis B. Mayer referred to his sparkling young star as a hunchback. Garland herself yearned to be a glamour queen like MGM's Czech import, the gloriously vacant Hedy Lamarr. Or steamy, homegrown talent Lana Turner. Judy was beautiful and blessed with more talent in her little finger than any of the studio's over-upholstered and lacquered sirens. But she couldn't see it. In December 1941, the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. America entered the Second World War. Hollywood was not far behind. Along with fellow movie stars, Judy Garland threw herself into a whirlwind of activity. There was nothing she wanted to do more than sing to the boys who were going overseas to fight. The activity was also an escape from a marriage that failed from the moment Rose agreed to Mayer's insistence that Judy have an abortion. MGM was more important than a baby. Judy was heartbroken. Garland was rushed into For Me and My Gal, joining forces with Gene Kelly, fresh from Broadway and making his Hollywood debut.
Say, what hit us?
Oh, it hit me a long time ago.
After her separation from David Rose, Garland consoled herself with Fox leading man Tyrone Power, and then moved on to writer-director Joseph L. Mankiewicz, a married man whose wife had suffered a nervous breakdown. But when Mankiewicz tried to guide Garland's career, he was swiftly given his marching orders from MGM by Louis B. Mayer. One of the most important backroom figures at MGM was Arthur Freed, the man in charge of the studio's musicals. Freed had championed Garland for The Wizard of Oz and had also advanced the career of another MGM talent, director Vincente Minnelli, who had started as a theatre set designer on Broadway and at the Radio City Musical. Minnelli spent 2 years at MGM, a creative member of the superb team assembled by Freed, but without a clearly defined role. He was then promoted to directing with MGM's all-black musical, Cabin in the Sky. A movie which lingered lovingly on beautiful Lena Horne. Minnelli was next assigned to replace George Cukor on Meet Me in St. Louis. Set during the 1903 World's Fair and featuring sets which cost the then huge sum of $250,000, Meet Me in St. Louis was a musical which beguilingly wove the songs into the storyline. At the center of the movie is Garland's Esther Smith, mooning over callow Tom Drake in The Boy Next Door and stopping the show with the trolley song, movie magic. On the set it was less magical. Minnelli worked hard to smooth Garland's increasingly temperamental behavior, the result of overwork and the drugs which kept her going. He succeeded, and Meet Me in St. Louis proved a smash at the box office. Minnelli had steered the storm-tossed ship safely into harbor. While Minnelli was still editing the movie, in the spring of 1944, he began living with Judy Garland. But Garland, along with everyone else at MGM, knew that Minnelli was homosexual, as were many members of Freed's unit. Many of those in the know were skeptical about the future of the relationship between the star performer and star director. But the two worked happily together on a lavish musical, Ziegfeld Follies. And then tackled a straight dramatic role for Judy in The Clock, a tender wartime romance co-starring Robert Walker.
Will you break that date tonight? Yes! Oh. Oh! Where'll I meet you?
Under the clock at the Astor at 7.
Where?
Under the clock at the Astor at 7.
What? Under the clock at the Astor at 7.
Garland and Minnelli were now considering marriage. It was an arrangement which would allow Garland to enjoy flings with other men. But more importantly, marriage to the attentive Minnelli made Judy feel needed. She could live without money, and later did, but not without love. Minnelli also introduced Judy to the metropolitan delights of New York. The circles in which Minnelli moved made Hollywood look like the provincial town it was. To Judy, the Big Apple seemed like the center of the world. On the 15th of June, 1945, 5 days after her 23rd birthday, Judy Garland became Mrs. Vincent Minnelli. The watchful Louis B. Mayer welcomed the union. He thought it would turn Minnelli into a heterosexual and provide Garland with much-needed stability. And, Mayer concluded, Minnelli's deft handling of Garland on the set would be good for business. The couple honeymooned in New York. Walking the streets, Garland was always hailed by passers-by as Judy, never Miss Garland. She was happy and vowed to Minnelli that she would kick her punishing regime of amphetamines. On the 12th of March, 1946, Liza May Minnelli was born. Liza unquestionably had her father's large eyes and upturned nose. The future looked rosy. But Judy proved an erratic mother, and she was desperate to return to work. The comeback movie was The Pirate, directed by her husband and co-starring Gene Kelly. The production went badly. The Pirate was a lavish but misfiring spoof on adventure movies which went way over the top.
The roar of angry cannon, and you Makoko, standing there with lightning breaking about you. You dominating everything.
Manuela, there's something I have to tell you.
And to think I thought you were nothing but a common actor. Oh.
Now look, I've apologized abjectly. What more can I do? Just exactly...
Garland convinced herself that Minnelli was having an affair with her co-star. She behaved appallingly, sulked, and refused to come to work for days on end. MGM producer Joe Pasternak later recalled,
She just wanted somebody very, very badly, and then she got him. The glamour was gone. And I don't think she enjoyed her private life. I don't think she knew what she wanted in private life, especially the last 10 years. And as I said, it's awfully difficult for an actress, a young girl, to be as successful and stay normal. Very few of them will do it.
Judy rallied for Easter Parade, co-starring with Fred Astaire, whom she admired greatly. But she looked painfully thin and drawn. Garland's last film at MGM was Summerstock. She had already been fired from Annie Get Your Gun. Her figure had now ballooned. At the end of shooting, Judy shed the extra pounds in a crash diet to film one of her most celebrated routines. The effect was so dramatic that audiences were convinced that the sequence must have been an outtake from another movie. It was her parting gift to MGM. Doré Sherry had replaced Louis B. Mayer and had no patience with Garland's tantrums. By the summer of 1950, Garland had separated from Vincent Minnelli and lost her contract with MGM. Aged 28, she left the studio with which she had been contracted, some might say enslaved, for nearly half her life. Louis B. Mayer's studio machine had made Judy, and then had broken her. She was to make only 4 more movies before her death. But George Cukor's A Star Is Born, released in 1954, is a flawed masterpiece. It enabled Judy to inhale the toxic fumes of her own tortured grease paint life.
It's like you dreamed it.
Oh, no. I've got more. So much more.
Perhaps she had. Her career was taken in hand by her third husband, Sidney Luft, with whom she had 2 children, Lorna and Joey. And with Sidney's help, Garland launched herself on a concert career in which she entranced international audiences, from London's Palladium Theatre to the Palace in New York. Her 1951 Palace run lasted a record 19 weeks. After MGM, Judy had found a new home. And a new audience. At her best, Judy would have sung all night for her fans. Throughout the 50s and 60s, Judy Garland appeared regularly in concert, both in America and in Europe. A Garland concert was like no other. Her relationship with her fans was unique. A Garland concert was always charged with emotion. The pain was there, and an honesty which transcended the emotions of her movies. Throughout these years, the Garland family lived a wandering and eccentric life. Years later, Liza Minnelli recalled an incident after a show.
into the ladies' room. There was an old drunk lady in there. And it was just, you know, with the sequin straps and one of those dames. And she said, "Oh, Judy, you're terrific. You're Judy, the rainbow. You gotta always remember the rainbow." Then when she went into one of the stalls, the lady knocked on the door. She said, "Yes?" She said, "Judy, never forget the rainbow. God, it's helped me through so many crises." And as we're going out, she had on this incredible long feathered boa. The last thing that this lady said again was, "Don't forget the rainbow, Judy." And Mama turned and kind of threw the boa around herself, and she said, "How can I forget the rainbow? I've got rainbows up my ass."
In 1963, Judy starred with Dirk Bogarde in a tug-of-love drama, I Could Go On Singing.
He's my son, and I'm going to keep him.
He's my son, too. I made him.
Judy's life was so demanding, so insistent. There was telephone calls at 3 in the morning, at 4 in the morning, at 5 in the morning. Cables, letters, intensive, I. Suddenly destroyed your whole existence because Judy didn't believe that anybody else had a life of their own to live. Certainly without her. And therefore, if you had a film to do or a book to write or a composing or whatever you were doing, it didn't matter to Judy as long as you were on tap night and day. We couldn't, in the end, I think I speak for a lot of her friends, not all, but we couldn't take the stress of it. We had to get on and live our own lives. And we had to go. And she lost it. And we did turn our backs, and we did, yes, we did walk away.
Judy's fifth and final marriage was to nightclub owner Michael Deans. The best man was 50s crooner Johnny Ray. The crowds turned up, but not one of the big names who had been invited to the London wedding. The bride was like a wraith, gnawed away by the pills. Garland was nearing the end of the yellow brick road. The big names did turn up for her funeral in 1968. Judy had died alone of a drug overdose in London. Right up to the end, as if to torment her, she had never completely lost that incandescent talent. Vincent Minnelli outlived Judy by 17 years, dying laden with honors in 1986. His was the talent that coaxed from his wife some of the most cherishable moments in the movies. Hindsight lends them a peculiar poignancy. Even when Garland and Minnelli failed, it was not through lack of ambition.
Lightning breaking about you, you dominating everything.
Manuela, there's something I have to tell you.
And to think I thought you were nothing but a common actor.
There was nothing common about Judy Garland's talent, even when it was coarsened by drugs and middle age. In a scene from I Could Go On Singing, she summed up the price she had paid.
You can get me there, sure, but can you make me sing? I sing for myself. I sing when I want to, whenever I want to, just for me. I sing for my own pleasure, whenever I want. Do you understand that?
I do understand that. Just hang on to that, will you? Hang on to it.
Well, I've hung on to every bit of rubbish there is to hang on to in life. And I've thrown all the good bits away.
But she also left many of them behind. For us.